Hey, and welcome back to the Mariposa Quilt Along. This is our last week, our last round, our last video. We are gonna have a finished quilt top at the end of this video. I am so excited. This has been a pretty easy quilt, don't you think? I think it has. We've moved really quick. The first week was choosing and cutting fabrics. Second week was making 6 blocks. Third week was making another 6 blocks. So if you haven't already watched those videos or done those tasks, you're gonna need to do those first. This round, we are going to be preparing our sashing, getting it sewn into our blocks, and then we'll prepare our border, and then we're gonna sew that to our blocks. And finish quilt top time. I am so ready for this. There's a little bit of sewing before we can actually start piecing everything together. We've got to get the sashing prepared and get the borders prepared. So we're going to do that first, on the sashing anyway, and then we will start sewing up these blocks. So let's take a look at the fabrics you're going to need for this. We're working with exclusively background fabric this time. Easy peasy there, but there's going to be a lot of sewing, so we need to get started. All right, so at this point you should have these pieces left for your quilt. We've got these thicker strips of fabric, and these are actually our borders, but for right now we're just going to set these to the side. We don't need to use them. And these are those rectangles that go between your block, and just for a few minutes we're also going to leave these here, and we're going to focus on these strips that are the sashing between each of our rows. So we want to get these prepared first, and I'm just going to give these a quick iron, not no serious iron, because I've already pressed them, and I'm going to press them again in a minute, but they've been sitting in my tray folded like that. So, and what we're going to do is I'm going to cut this selvage off. I'm just going to take my rotary cutter and whoop, a straight line, and then we're going to sew them all together, so that you should have 4 of them, and you're going to sew all 4 end to end. So that's going to look a little something like that. So let's get this into one big giant strip. All right, I'm going to show you this really quick because I don't think I have any video sewing sashing like this together. And I thought I would show you how I do it to keep it from getting twisted and you having to use your seam ripper. All right, so I always have the strips just like this. So I've got the fold on this side, and then I've got the raw edges right over here. So this is exactly what I do. And this is the same thing I do with binding too, by the way. So I take this first layer and I just flip it that way, and then I pick these 2 up. So this is actually the strip on top, and then the second strip, I'll take it like that, and then we're just gonna send them through. And now, as long as I keep everything just like this, I won't get anything mixed up. So I just keep doing it exactly like this. And what I mean by mixed up is it twisted. One turned one way and one turned the other, where you end up with this big twist in your strip. I have done that, and I have been very angry about it. So, so I learned this way to help out with that. All right, so pretty easy peasy, and they should be all sewn together looking like this. You still end up with that fold, so I like to just spend a minute pressing that out, because it'll help you when you go to trim this to the sizes you need to not have that fold taking up any of the length. All right, so in the pattern you might notice that I didn't put a direction for these to press these seams in. I just said press your seams, and that's because it doesn't matter. You can do anything you want with these, but I like to press them open, so that's what I do. I think it always helps me in the quilting, and so I always press open. So I'm doing this little number. I'm going to continue on just like this. All right, so we've sewn our pieces together, we've pressed them, and now we've got to cut these to size, and we need 3 of these strips that go between the rows. So there's 3 sashing long strips that go between your 4 rows. And they're longer than my cutting mat, so I'm gonna have to do a little bit of maneuvering. That's okay. So I've gotten these really set nicely and on top of each other. Is, you know, I'm cutting 2 at a time. You don't have to cut 2 at a time. It's easier if you don't, but I feel pretty confident to do it. So I've got it doubled up, and these first 2 strips I'll be able to cut double, but the third one I'll have to cut single because I only need 3. All right, so I like to pick a line on my cutting mat and put them right to that line, both layers, to make sure that I'm cutting a nice looking strip. I don't want to cut anything wobbly or wonky because it'll affect the rest of my quilt from this point on. So I'm going to spend a little time making sure that they are sitting on one of those lines nicely. And I am going to probably cut the very edges off because I like to start with a perfect measurement. It's trying to get those 2 layers lined up perfectly is almost impossible, but if I cut a tiny piece off, I know it's perfect. All right, and then since it's too big, I'm going to, my mat is 36 inches, and I'm going to stop on the 30. So I'm going to pick this up on the 30 line, and I'm going to put this little piece on the number 1 line. And again, I'm going to pick a line on the mat, and I'm going to line up both of my pieces to it. I like to put the rotary cutter here just to hold it. And then I'm going to get these lined up nicely again. All right, so now this is going to start at 30, so I'm going to count to the size I need, which is 52 and a half, I think. 52 and a half, 30, 40, 50, 51, 52, 50 and a half. Let me do that one more time. All right, and then I'm going to cut. All right, so we've got 2 sashings in the right measurements. So that's good. This next one, I'm just going to do the same thing, but I'm only going to be working with 1 layer. All right, so there is our 3rd sashing strip for our row, and then we end up with this small piece of scrap that we can put in our scrap basket. So let's go to the design wall. All right, trying to give you the best view of everything. Those little rectangles, well, they're not little. Those rectangles that we started off talking about, these are going to go between my blocks, so I'm going to put them between my blocks, and then the sashing that we just cut is going to go between these rows. So let me spend a minute getting everything situated in the right place, and then we will move on. It's a smidgen wonky. That's okay, because we just need it up there so we don't get confused when we start sewing everything together. So we are ready. So you may have your own style of sewing everything together, and definitely use what works for you, but I am going to show you what works for me just because people always ask. So I like to start at my bottom and work my way up. I feel like that keeps me from getting my rows out of order because I'm always adding on to the top. So that's the way I do it. So I'm going to go ahead and pick these up from the bottom, and I'm going to keep them in the order that they're in. All right. I'm going to take these and start sewing them together, and then we'll press them. So let me do this. All right, so I like to put them on the cutting mat this way so that I can pay attention to these seams, and we want everything to be pressed to the sashing. So that looks a little like this. Do you want to make sure that I'm not leaving any lip, because that will distort the size of our piece. So pretty simple. All right, and that is that piece. Let me go back over to the other side of this room so that I can show you how to pin this sashing on, just in case you've never done it before. All right, here's a little bit of a wider look. So this is the way I always sew mine together. So I got my bottom row, then I'm gonna go get the next piece, and that just happens to be sashing this time. So let me get it. All right, here's my sashing. and we're sewing a really long piece. So we want to find the middle, and I've already shown you how to do that, I think, in this quilt along, but you just press to find your middle. So I just give it a big press with my finger. You can do this with the iron if you prefer. And that is going to be our center marker. That's going to mark our center right there. So we need to also do that for the quilt, but because we have this nice little piece right here, I can pretty much eyeball it. You can also finger press this if you want to be exact, but I feel pretty confident eyeballing this. So I'm going to pin this first. So you do this. This is important. If you've ever made a quilt and your sashing didn't meet your row, or your border didn't meet your block size, it's because I don't know why the fabric shifts in your sewing machine, but it does. So putting that center there and having that 100% accurate is a way to keep from your sashing ending up being too long for whatever you're sewing it to, or too short for whatever you're sewing to. And I've had it go both ways, and it's ridiculously frustrating, and that would be a lot of stitches to seam rip. So for me, it's better just to take the time and get this right. So once I get my center, I'm going to move on to my ends. So we're going to take the end and we're going to pin it right in place to the end of our row. And then you can just fill this in with pins, as many as you like, as few as you like. I feel like it really does, the pins really do help when you're sewing these long pieces together. So I am going to fill it up about every 3 or 4 inches. All right, and we're going to do the same thing on this end that we did with the first. We're going to line up this end to end, pop a pin in, and then I'm going to fill this up. I do want to point out one small thing, just in case. I know there's a lot of brand new quilters participating in this quilt along, and this is their very first quilt. So if while you were making your blocks, you ran upon some of your pieces being a little bit longer or shorter and things didn't measure out perfectly, but you went with it, if that has happened to you, and look here, it's happening to me. See, this piece is a little bit longer than this. So what I do is, how does my sashing lay across this? Because I don't know 100% what's too long, or what if this is too long, or if that's too short. I really don't know. So I'm going to, when I take and pin this in all the other places that are accurate, it kind of shows me that this is the piece. My flying geese unit right here was a little bit longer than it needed to be. So this is where I will fudge and hide my little tiny errors inside my seam allowance. So you see how this sashing sits nicely across here. So I'm just going to pin that in place like I just showed you. But when I sew, I'm not going to use this where I know it's wrong. I'm not going to use this as the where I sew. I'm going to use this right here. So just a tiny little insight into how to fix these little errors. And we all have them in every single quilt. So don't think that you aren't doing as good as the next person. I've been quilting for 13 years and there's a pretty big error. So those get hidden. I call it fudging. So we make it work. So all right, so let's go and sew all of this. We're going to use our 1/4 inch seam and get it done. Okay, I got my sashing sewn on. And goes off and on, off and on. All right, so before I press this, and we are going to press it towards the sashing, I'm just going to give it this little set my seams right here, because I feel like it helps me get the sashing to go in the direction I want it to go in with the least resistance. So I always set my seams. And that is, there's our sashing on our first row, or our bottom row. All right, so I'm going to repeat these steps. I'm not going to video all of this. I'm going to go ahead and keep doing this until I have everything sewn together. Now, one thing when you have your next row together and you're sewing it to this sashing, you'll still want to give this a fold and finger press right here. so that you know where to put this on the row. So there's my center. So I won't eyeball that. I will do the finger press. So let's go and get everything sewn together as far as our blocks and our sashing, and then I'll meet you back over here when it's time to do borders. Okay, so you should have a piece that looks like the piece behind me, big giant, almost quilt top, and we're going to tackle our borders. So we're gonna do these the same way that we did the sashing. I'm gonna give mine a little press because they got a little wrinkled. Cut off the selvages, then we're gonna sew them end to end, press them, cut them to the sizes we need. You'll have two different sizes. You'll have your side border size, and then you'll have your top and bottom size. When you have them cut, you're gonna sew the side borders on first, then you'll do the top and bottom. Don't forget to use the finger press, the middle trick like I showed you on the sashing. You'll need that to make sure that everything fits the way it needs to. So when I come back, I will have a finished quilt top. All right. All right. So that is it. Done, done, and done. I am so excited. Let me pop a picture on here so you can get a better look at mine. All right, and this is going to wrap up the Mariposa Quilt Along. If you are going to be around for the next weekish, 2 weeks, I'm planning a big post about finishing these up. I don't know how in depth I'm going to go in the videos, but I'm definitely going to give you a little helping hand and point you in the right directions to what you need to get it finished and to snuggle under it. So if you are signed up for the newsletters and you've been receiving them for Mariposa Quilt Along, you are already signed up for all of the quilt alongs from the book, and we have 4 more to go. We are starting Lulu Louise in March. So like I said, if you're already signed up, you'll receive a newsletter from me probably late February, and I'll be getting everything ready to go for that quilt along, letting you know what you'll need and when exactly we're getting started and all those details. So look for that late February. Double check the blog. The schedule is on there with exact dates. That is going to be another fun one. It's even easier than this one. It's just really, really big. So I'm excited to tackle that one too. So I'm signing off. Thank you for making this quilt with me. I hope you had as much fun as I did.